Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today on the Dungeon Dive, we are taking a look at Stranger Things Upside Down, a game from Cool Mini or Not, and a game designed by Rob Davio. So the subtitle of this video is IP games are good now, and the answer is kind of yes. Actually, some of the IP games have been good for quite some time, but that used to not be the case, especially way back in the day, in like the early in the 80s and 90s. IP games were really, really bad. If you walked into Toys R Us or KB Toys and you saw a board game based off of your favorite movie or TV show, there was a really, really good chance, like 9 out of 10 chance that that game was going to be straight up garbage. They were really quick, cheap cash ins, probably not worth the price of the cardboard they were printed on. But that's really not the case anymore. Things have been getting better and better as board games in general have been getting better and better. People have been paying more attention to combining cool IPs with cool mechanisms and cool ideas, cool art and cool components to make games that are really fun. And I think Stranger Things Upside Down is pretty good. I would put it in a similar camp as something like Horrified. I don't think it's quite as good as Horrified. Horrified is one of my favorite games, and it's a fantastic gateway game to get people into the hobby, into hobby games. But I think Stranger Things gets pretty close. And the cool thing about an IP is that it makes it easy to introduce people to a game. You can say to a friend, hey, you really like Stranger Things? Well, there's this pretty cool board game based on Stranger Things. And you would have a good way of just kind of introducing them into the world of hobby games. Now, because this is an IP-based game, let's briefly talk about my general feelings on Stranger Things. So, Stranger Things, of course, a show on Netflix. It is a show that I like, but I don't love. At least there are a few things I do love about the show. I love the whole 80s vibe, being a Gen X kid. Being a Gen X person, I should say, no longer a kid, at least physically. But I love that theme of the 80s. I love seeing Winona Ryder in a cool thing again. Of course, she was like my first crush, her and Molly Ringwald. And just seeing her vibrant again and in a really cool role of Jace Byers is awesome. I love the whole idea of how the setup of the show was the kids were playing D&D in their basement, and that just kind of, it rings true to me. While I do like some of the things of the show, I think the overall execution of a lot of it is a little bit off. The show really hasn't known what to do with Eleven and Mike since the first season. So anything involving them is kind of a letdown. However, there are characters like Steve and Dustin and Robin and Erica. Anything with them is gold. The introduction of Max as a character was awesome, and Eddie in season 4. In season 4, from episode 4 on, is truly stunning. Some of my favorite television. So overall, I consider myself somewhat of a fan of the show, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it finally concludes in its final season. But now let's talk about the board game. I'm going to give a quick general overview of the game, and then I have about 4 positive points and 4 negative points in the review. So in Stranger Things, the Upside Down, you will have... Actually, let's take a look at the back of the box here. We always like to do that. So November 6, 1983, Hawkins, Indiana. Young Will Byers disappears one evening while riding his bike back home from a long RPG session. The frightening event becomes the first of many to befall the small Midwestern town. Yes, Hawkins, I'm surprised anybody still lives in Hawkins, Indiana. So this is based on seasons 1 and 2 of the show. On the board here, you see season 1 set up. On the flip side is a different board for season 2. That is super cool. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about the board in a minute. So, based on the first two seasons of the highly acclaimed Netflix series, Stranger Things Upside Down is a cooperative game in which players take on the role of the protagonists of the series, trying to stop terrifying supernatural forces and save Will from the horrors of the Upside Down. With different sets of cards and a board for each season, players navigate the city of Hawkins, gather items and allies, escape a secret government agency, fight the horrors invading from the Upside Down, and along the way, prove that nothing is stronger than friendship. So, as a cooperative game, Stranger Things is a kind of prototypical threat management game. You have a whole bunch of fires to put out on the board and only a few buckets of water. That seems to be kind of a typical marriage of theme and mechanism in these kind of standard cooperative games. So you will be playing characters such as Dustin Henderson, Mike Wheeler, Nancy Wheeler, and in my party right now, I am playing as Lucas Sinclair, Joyce Byers, and Jim Hopper down here in the corner. Each of the characters will have a starting location in Hawkins. They will have a certain power, and they will have a certain number of fear. Fear is basically your HP. As you get scared, you will go back down, and then you will become terrified. Each of the characters can hold 2 items and any number of allies, and getting allies is one of the main things you want to do in the game. On the board, there are spaces where you have these stack of tokens, and these tokens are challenge tokens. They are challenge stacks. In order to do what is on the board, you have to spend a certain value of action cards and meet or beat the value of the tokens in that stack. You have to do so in order to recruit allies or to use 11's psychic powers. So 11 isn't a character in the game, but there are 6 psychic powers that you can trigger to help the characters who are playing in this game. In the first season here, you are trying to go down into the Upside Down and rescue Will. And to rescue Will, you have to beat a few of these stacks of challenge tokens. There are, I think the numbers are 0 through 5, and most of the tokens in each stack will be hidden. You will be able to investigate in order to reveal some of the tokens in each stack, so you have a better idea of how strong the challenge is going to be to overcome. And as you play your action cards, you will add the totals of your action cards to meet or beat the totals of the tokens in each stack. If you play an action card that has a walkie-talkie on it, that means that you are working together with other characters in that particular space, and you get to add a bonus. If you play an action card that has a hazard symbol on there, then you will draw more of the scene cards at the end of your turn. There will be a set number of scene cards that you draw each turn, and the scene cards are where the game fights back against you. This is where all the bad stuff happens. Now, you can also investigate at the lab to ignore a certain number of scene cards, and doing that becomes very, very important. There's this kind of tug-of-war balance because as you are clearing off stacks of tokens, stacks of challenges on the board, the game is adding them back, and so you're kind of constantly pulling, pushing, and shoving, trying to fight the game as you are trying to rescue Will. But each one of these different scene cards has a certain bad thing that will happen, such as moving the Gorgon around, or the Demigorgon around, or perhaps moving the vans around, hunting down for the kids. Maybe certain allies will get arrested. All kinds of different bad things will happen when you draw these scene cards. So it's a really good idea to investigate the laboratory so you can ignore some of these. And on this main board here, the board for season 1, we have different ways to help 11, and you can use her psychic powers. We can recruit an ally at the school. We can get items in town. And there is a small item deck, and each one of these items will help you do a certain thing, like maybe investigate the lab, or will help you fight a foe, might help you rescue Will, or maybe you can help 11. Of course, Joyce Byers right now is equipped with the Eggo waffles, so I get a +3 whenever I'm facing a challenge to help 11. You can go to the police station where you can gather info about flipped down tokens, so you can see what the One of the challenges is going to be, or one of the sums, one of the chips that you will add to the total. You can calm down, and that's how you lessen your fear. So that's how you heal. You can recruit an ally over here at the buyer's home, or maybe gain an item. You can calm down at Castle Buyers there. And then as you move down into the upside down, you can fight the Demogorgon. You can help Eleven again and use some of her psychic powers. Or the main thing that you want to do down here is go through and face off the challenges on rescuing Will. And that's kind of the main overview of the game, a very general overview. So now let's talk about a few things I like and a few things I don't like. So number one that I love is the board. This is one of the coolest looking boards I've ever seen. I love it. As soon as I saw a picture of this board, I kind of knew I had to at least take a look at this game. The art on the board is excellent. I think it does a really good job of depicting Hawkins, of depicting the upside down, and then on the reverse side we have Hawkins, and then we have the tunnels below Hawkins. Super cool idea of having a board on each side to represent the different seasons. I think they put a lot of thought into that. I think the town looks great. I like the key locations of the school. We have the Wheeler House, the police station, Main Street, the laboratory, Castle Buyers, the buyer's home, and the scrapyard. We have the things that we think about when we think of Hawkins. And then underneath here in the upside down, it's all ashy and gross and gooey. And so super cool. Great board design. And that leads me to point number two, and that is the art in general. I think the art is pretty fantastic. I'm very happy that they didn't just go with images from the film. They did painted images, and it looks great, because a lot of times, at least on the cheaper IP games, they'll just take some stills from the movie or from the show and shove them into the cards without much rhyme or reason or thought. And it kind of takes away from the game, in my opinion. But the art here is excellent. The characters look like the characters they're supposed to be depicting. Hawkins and the upside down look cool. The art on the scene cards looks cool. Here are the season 2 cards here. So each season has its own deck of scenes. And as you can see, yeah, I mean, that's great. That's really high quality art there. I love that. And then some of the allies that you might see in season 2, of course, we have Karen, Jonathan, Scott, Clark, Bob, Newberry there, or Newbie, Max there, Dr. Sam Owens, Murray, and then cool Steve Harrington there. Steve is not a character that you can play in season 1 or 2. Hopefully they do a season 3 and 4 where you get to play as Steve and Robin and Erica and Dustin. Those would always be my 4 characters that I played, because they're by far the 4 best characters in the game, or in the television show. So yes, the art overall, the game looks fantastic. It has really nice components. I also think that the game does a good job of emulating the kind of ebb and flow of tension found in a dramatic television show. And it does that by regulating the turns and how much threat is introduced. So when you are playing your hand of cards, each turn you will have 5 action cards that you can spend. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can spend those to add to your movement, or you can spend those to overcome challenges. As you play cards, the more cards you play with hazard signs, the more scenes you will have to draw at the end of your turn, the more bad stuff happens. So you could go through a couple turns without playing any of the cards that have your hazard symbol on it. But eventually you're going to end up with a hand that looks something like this, where you have nothing but added hazard tokens, added hazard icons on your cards. And then to do anything on that turn, you are facing a huge surmounting odds of danger, and you will have to draw a whole bunch of scene cards. And I think that is really cool, because you have to think about the balance of okay, do I want to do like some really safe turns and then have a really dangerous turn, or have a few just kind of semi-dangerous turns going on? But I think that does a good job of emulating the kind of ebb and flow and the building tension and release found in a well-executed drama series. So that part of the show is very well emulated on the table in Stranger Things Upside Down. Okay, so point number four. Point number four is you do feel like you are working together as a group of characters. Right now, of course, I'm playing, like I said, Lucas, Joyce, and Jim. I'm using their strengths, offsetting their weaknesses, using their different items that they have, and trying to get down into the Upside Down to rescue Will. Right now I have Joyce and Jim are down in the Upside Down, trying to beat the challenges down here to rescue Will, while Lucas is kind of up here in Hawkins, making sure that he's investigating the laboratory to prevent the drawing of the cards. Lucas is up here kind of recruiting allies. You should probably play with 4. I don't think it's very hard to play with 4 characters. The characters don't have a lot to manage. So playing with 4 is probably best. So you could have 2 up, 2 down. And then when you really need to focus on one side, you can send the whole crew down into the Upside Down or send the whole crew back to Hawkins. Working as a team is very important. However, there's a kind of a double-edged sword here, and this leads me to my first negative, is I wish it was easier to work together. I haven't yet seen the ability to move as a single unit. I'm not sure, maybe there's an item, maybe there's a power, I don't know yet, but I think having the ability to group together to move would make things a little bit easier when you really need to tackle a big threat. And you also cannot trade items. And that makes things a little difficult because you may draw one item for Lucas that would actually benefit Joyce a lot more. But not having the ability to trade items is an interesting choice on the part of Rob Daviau. And I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it would make the game too easy. But so that's kind of this double-edged sword of, while I like working together as a team, I wish the game offered more ways to do so. Another slightly negative element is everything is based off of card play. And so you know exactly what you are going to play. You don't always know what's going to be on the backside of these chips. So the total of the threat you are trying to overcome is a little bit of a secret, but you will always know exactly what your value is. I wish there was a chance D6, maybe a D3 that you could roll to add a little bit of luck to this element. Something like, I think in the last few Jerry Hawthorne games, like Aftermath, has that chance where you can play some cards for an action, but you always have that chance of getting a little bit more. And that's a thing that I like a lot in games. So I think just adding maybe a die that had a 0, 1, or 2 that you could add, or maybe it had, you could do a pressure luck element where the die had maybe a hazard sign and then a +1 or a +2. So you could choose to use that if you wanted to pressure luck to get just 1 or 2 more, but you also might have to draw an additional scene at the end of the game. I think that would be a really cool compromise to this system. And then finally, my final negative is I wish there were more items and more allies. I think in a typical game, you're probably going to see all of the items and all of the allies. And so I think just having more variety in the items and allies and in how they are used and how they come out and how you can equip them, maybe possibly trading them, I think that would add a little bit more variety to each season of the game. But overall, I think Stranger Things, The Upside Down is a cool game. If you like Stranger Things, if you're a big fan of Stranger Things and you like hobby board games, this is a no-brainer. This is a fun game. It's in a pretty small box, which is great. It's not going to take up a ton of space on your shelf. That's always a good thing. It has great components, great art. It looks cool. It has that season idea, which is just awesome. There are a few little drawbacks. This isn't going to be a game that you play all the time, but pulling it out with the family every couple months or something, or once a month, I think you could do a lot worse than Stranger Things. And actually, I think Stranger Things, The Upside Down is a pretty fun game. It's a good gateway game like Horrified to introduce people into the world of hobby gaming. And I think it captures its inspiration really well on the table. So, all right, you guys. Well, hope you enjoyed taking this look at Stranger Things, The Upside Down from Cool Mini or Not, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.